There was a recording error and my voice got cut off. So, as we get into the second year of Donald Trump's second term in the Oval Office, it's worth thinking about how America is going to change when Donald Trump exits the presidency. It's unclear whether or not he'll actually um, leave politics. He may be an active commentator, and he may hold political sway, much in the way that he held on to political sway when he was out of office during Biden's rule. Um, but he will be leaving politics. This will be um, a major turning point for American politics and culture. And what are we going to do? What will the future of the GOP look like? It's anyone's guess, frankly. I think, if anything, the last 10 years of politics have shown us that a lot can happen very quickly. Things can move back and forth. Ground that was gained by one faction can be ceded and lost quite quickly. Um, One thing that I worry about is that there will be attempts to make politics look like how politics has been when it was, um, more standard. When the era when people were invoking language of there being a mono party, a security elite that has rigged politics in the United States. Now, the extent to which this narrative gets told and how it's told, um, it can be somewhat exaggerated, somewhat fictitious, but there's truth behind it as well. There are elites who have had a lot of sway in politics across the Western world for a long time, and they've stuck to a playbook um, that I really think has aged. And I mean, the failure of, um, we'll say, like post 1945 international liberalism has not been due solely to the presence of Donald Trump on the political stage. Donald Trump certainly played an important part. He personalized what were flaws that were merely inherent um, to the world. Um, a lot led to Trump's rise, including um, the expression of disparate views through the internet. Um, I mean, I really think the breakdown of a monopoly on media and opinion uh, held an enormous effect. If you don't have everybody all speaking to the same institutional standard narrative for what the free world represents, if you lose the ways in which that narrative can be insulated, protected, and kept within the centers of power, you're going to get a new world order, so it seems. Now, I worry that people are going to be trying to bring back the former world order, the former norms. They're going to go back to the postmodern influence. Uh, this idea that we're going to be hyperactive in our embassies across the world. We're going to be building them up. We're going to be exporting soft power with the goal of promoting free market capitalism and democracy, which is really just more. I won't go too deeply into it, but um, I mean, this doesn't seem at all like it's the future. And I voice this because I've heard from people who have been involved in, the security elite or whatever, and they all have this really, I think, kind of rigid outlook that is either an expression of naivete, or um, it's just that they feel overly confident in their ability to secure a single simple narrative insofar as the future of the world is supposed to unfold. Um, and I don't know what the true replacement of the present world order will be. There's too many moving pieces here. I don't think MAGAism is sufficient for producing a new world order. The new world order will be a reaction to MAGAism, and among other things. I don't think the left has much of a strong plan. at this point. Insofar as they've made claims about the international world order, they have, over the last several decades, heavily attacked the supposed colonial and imperial um, power of Western nations. I don't know if they've done a very good job of producing a vision for an alternative organizational arrangement um, for nations that would be different from the post 1945 world order, um, and leftist or something. They really are at this point focused on the criticism. The Cold War was perhaps or a time at which there was an international left trying to produce a separate communist world order, but the USSR and China and major players in the East were incorporated into the UN, into the post World War II era. So they weren't fully excluded or trying to develop something completely alternative um, when there was effectively a pretty shared basis for exchange and for coming to international agreement. Um, we have now a serious attempt to do away with global institutions. There's not much of a taste for the United Nations among the Trump wing of the Republican Party. There's not much respect for NATO. There's not, and I don't mean to be regurgitating a lot of points that you'll hear online. When I say that they don't care about NATO, I don't mean they don't give a single shit or they're totally ignorant about it. They seem to be engaged with NATO. They seem to recognize that it is important. It can be leveraged, but they're not totally committed to upholding it as it has historically been for the last several decades. They're totally okay putting pressure on it. They're okay with bargaining it away. Um, and I don't know what an alternative arrangement will just be. At this point, it looks like it's going to be um, taking in, um, we'll say, recently unprecedented behavior from the United States and from even political activity happening at a domestic level within European nations, like the rise of the national populist right. Then those who have power outside of those norms, power that is more rooted in or sees the world more similarly to um, the world of the last 70, 80 years, will just be reacting to these things. And then there will be a pretty reactively built arrangement. There's going to be specific norms that consolidate among how the U.S. engages with one particular nation, specific tariff agreements, as an example. Now, here's the thing. Um, to really be a person who has influence on global affairs, it's pretty difficult. Um, what ways of getting a higher degree of influence than most people is to simply enter some of the channels in American society that provide you with better insight into how global institutions work. So one example is going to a fancy school and getting a degree that is related to international institutions where you're going to become educated insofar as how to interact with the European Union, um, what institutions are working to solve aspects about, problems surrounding cybersecurity or internet content moderation or things like this. You can go to DC and get a job working at a think tank, um, becoming a lobbyist where whoever you work for has some sort of international concern. Um, all of this starts to bleed into how politics works, not only internationally but domestically as well. But to get insight into the playing field of politics and geopolitics, um, one way is you ingratiate yourself into these worlds. Another thing is you kind of pick up on um, the information that gets shared around, and if you're especially informed, your commentary becomes useful or pertinent. That can just be digesting data online, reading news articles, knowing your informational resources and using them well. Now, we see a lot of fragmentation in the cultural space and the political space, commenting on national and international affairs. You have politics, you have podcasts rising up. You have competing frameworks from competing journalists and media upstarts trying to explain to you what the world is. The most resourced ones are the ones that are, in many ways, more so of a voice of power. So it seems, but you can't always be too critical of it because um, there is a difference between having good information and having bad information. Being in contact and dialogue with diplomats who are around today, ambassadors who are around today who have experience, and being somebody who's totally on the fringes, totally outside. Um, I've been thinking about all of this because it's difficult to find what you really believe in. It's difficult to um, find, maybe I'll personalize it even more. Um, it's easy to find institutions that are projecting a particular viewpoint that you some what one I myself might be more hostile to or less hostile to. Um, but it's maybe not always good to hitch your wagon simply to whatever is functional and right in front of you. Um, Sometimes it's good to pursue a totally personalized outlook. Um, Now, part of my desire in making videos is that I can organize my thoughts when I relate myself to the world, when I relate myself to politics, and also I can find a sense of what it is I really believe in, what issues really focus, what issues really command my focus. Um, Something about the world order. I think right now it's a good idea to just spectate, just watch. A lot of things are in flux right now. Trump's administration is extremely controversial. I mean, um, there's going to be a ton of bad blood after this, and the people who have power in this administration um, are not people who are going to be caring so much about the bad blood that they sow, the damage that they you know inflict upon people. They can protect themselves. They can remain insulated. I'm not saying this to be extremely critical. It's just a matter of fact. That's the approach that they've taken. You're either in the tent or you're out of the tent, and Lord knows what will happen to you if you're outside of the tent. Just try not to be a totally explicit enemy. And then people within the tent, they're subject to their own internal pressures and rules for conformity, rules for um, you know what what will earn you applause and what things will earn you skepticism or dislike. Um, and so it's in flux, and there's not look, if you don't have an established career that where it really is important who you associate with and um, what kind of ideas you support in any regard. Um, I mean, just don't, if you're not somebody who has a shit ton of stake in the political class and all this stuff, if you're young like myself, just don't get too, um, just stand away, just stay away from it. It's not your fight. Okay, have your own. I don't mean lose your principles or don't. I mean, but if you haven't discovered them, for example, just don't get too roped up into anything that's going on insofar as like cultivating international institutions goes, um, operating with some sort of politically engaged organization. Uh, just don't. And if you're somebody who does have views that really push you in a certain direction, you don't have a kind of I'm not going to call it a cool headedness. That seems loaded. Um, but if you're more indifferent for personal reasons, for reasons of opinion, um, if you are not somebody who's more indifferent, somebody who can't be, you have to pick some angle. You're somebody who's willing to fight on the street because of something that's happening in politics today. That's one thing. Okay, so if you personally are disposed in such a manner where just kind of minding your business is like impossible for you, okay, that's one thing. But those of us who don't feel that way, who don't feel so strongly, but just recognize that this is a chaotic moment, um, I would recommend let's stay the fuck out of a lot of this stuff because we don't really know what's going on and what's at stake, and it's a horrible place to plant yourself to try and grow. Um, that being said, however, I come to the sense that a lot of the things happening in politics today just are not going to matter in the future. They just will not. We're going to reach a point where all of this is going to be so characteristic of a bygone age. Um, like people talk about Nixon a lot now today because of the Watergate scandal. But if you were Watergate is associated with the 70s. I mean, there's so many things that are going to be happening today that will just be, oh, this is what it was like, the second half of the 2010s and the beginning of the 2020s. Like that's this world, this period, these people, these dramas that they have, these institutions that pop up, these scandals, um, these vendettas. Um, the all of this is going to be characteristic of a particular era. What I'm interested in is not, my disinterest in deeply engaging myself at this point is not cynical. It is optimistic. My hope is that we're going to be done with this stuff. All the toxicity, hopefully, will go with it. That is quite wishful thinking, but at least the toxicity of this particular moment will go with it. And there might be opportunities to develop a far healthier politics. It's hard to influence anything without connections or money, but you got to start somewhere, right? I would like to see personally a more literate political class. I would like to see a political class that is, um, more civilized, more interested in ideas, that's well read, where we kind of stop and think about things, where we don't. We've got to get rid of the schoolyard bullying and insults. Um, we've got to get rid of the total bad faith, hysteria, people who just scream and freak out when they hear an opinion that they dislike. Um, I mean, this stuff is terrible. I would like to, and I would like to also see, um, less of a populist. Populism is not inherently bad. Sometimes it's good to leverage populism if you have a corrupt elite. But I would like to see less of this kind of stupidly tribal mentality that our populist moment seems to be fully permissive of. Um, you know, uh, why do you have to be, um, if you're associated with a Republican Party, for example, uh, why do you need to kind of thump your chest on transgenderism, thump your chest on the normalization of homosexuality or you know it, it it's going in a direction now where it's like you even have to thump your chest about like mixed race stuff that is pretty bad. So I don't I don't think the kind of vulgar mob stuff, left or right, really should have much of a presence in politics in the future. That's my hope. I don't know if that's going to be meaningful. I legitimately think there's no reason to suggest it will go away. Um, but why can't you just be like balanced when you engage in politics or have a nuanced perspective that survives the incentives of the party? Why can't there be greater patience or I mean, that's not realistic at the base level, you know, but there is a leadership um, strata within these parties. Why can't they be a little more sophisticated in how they engage with each other and how they influence their parties? Now, all of this, as I speak, I can just imagine so many people I've met in my life who would say this is pretentious bullshit. Oh, you're so above it, or you're or they'd probably call me a slur or something. Um, but really, I think politics should be high-minded. I just do. Uh, and that's not to say that culture war issues aren't salient. I mean, I know what it's like to be in spaces where every conversation you hear is about culture war issues. And if you're young, especially, and your mind is still developing, you can only inflect off of what you see and what is going through your mind. Um, and so I have some sympathy for the desire to take strong culture war positions. But if you're somebody who's not in that network, who's not in some context where you're getting just hammered and beaten over the head with culture war stuff, um, I feel like you should try to move culture far away from that stuff. Um, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you really have to fight for some sort of resolution in these culture war issues um, before society can realistically move somewhere else. Like there has to be some resolution. You can't just kind of go away, build another culture, and hope that this stuff kind of starts to look silly at some point, or the people fomenting it silence themselves. Um, just my plan at this point is build something different, build a new cultural ecosystem for which to let your brain ferment and grow and have it be attached to things that are a lot healthier to you. Things that perhaps would implicitly address a culture war issue because they um, give you a certain ethos or a way of conducting yourself, a way of seeing the world that allows you to organically develop um, answers when these kinds of questions come up that are not developed fully within the scope of those questions. That was a little bit ambiguous and vague, but I mean, like, you know, if you read great literature as an example, you will come to a lot of life lessons and principles that stick with you. You can take those principles and life lessons that you got from literature and apply them to the problems that pop up in your life, be they related to culture war issues. That's different from fighting a culture war and being obsessed over it and only having answers and approaches to life that came out of that crucible, that battleground of the culture war. These are different things, and you get to resolution, I believe, um, possibly in both of them, but I think a far more healthy one um, by detaching yourself from culture war stuff. Um, so I don't know. In summary, I don't think Trumpism and MAGAism will dominate politics moving forward. We'll get something new. I don't know what it will look like. I don't know what it will look like on the left or the right. Um, and I don't think we can go back to, you know, like Bush, Clinton, um, Obama, uh, I grouped the two Bushes there, Obama, Biden, um, politics of an international security elite that believes in neoliberalism essentially in varying in varying resonances. um, and I guess we can lump Reagan in there, I suppose. Some people on the left view Reagan as a totally radical figure for whatever reason, but a lot of people who have been around for a long time, like they were around during the Reagan era, um, and they were around when Democrats were in office, and they're old now, and they are still active in D.C. in certain institutions like Council of Foreign Relations, think tanks around, and they believe that we can go back to things as they were prior to Trump, and that Trump was just this one guy who ruined everything. But once he's out, nobody will, everything will just go back to normal. I don't think that's realistic. I don't think that's a good thing either. I think that's preventing us from moving in a far more inventive direction. Okay, I've spoken a lot. Um, I'll make a second video. I'll do a part two. How about that?